What happens when the monster from a horror story turns out to be real? When a killer can taunt an entire nation and then just vanish? Tonight, we're looking at 3 true stories of American horror. These aren't urban legends. They're documented cases that have baffled investigators for decades, puzzles that are still missing the final piece. These are the stories that prove the honest-to-God truth is often far more terrifying than fiction. Story 1: The Zodiac Killer. Our first story takes us to Northern California in the late 1960s. It was the era of peace, love, and the summer of love. But as the counterculture movement blossomed, a dark opposing force began to cast a shadow across the San Francisco Bay Area. It started quietly, with terrifying, seemingly random attacks in the very places people felt safest. Young couples seeking a moment of privacy on remote lovers' lanes became the prey of a predator who appeared to kill for the sheer thrill of it. The terror began on December 20th, 1968. High school students David Faraday and Betty Lou Jensen, out on their very first date, were parked on a secluded road in Benicia. They were shot and killed, their lives brutally cut short. The crime was senseless, motiveless, and it left the community in shock. For 7 months, there was silence. Then, on the 4th of July, 1969, the shadow fell again. Another couple, Darlene Farron and Michael Mageau, were shot in their car in a park in Vallejo. Darlene died, but Michael survived. Bleeding and in shock, he gave police the very first description of the attacker: a heavy-set man with a plain, unremarkable face. Less than an hour after that attack, the killer did something that would define his reign of terror. He picked up a payphone, called the Vallejo Police Department, and in a low, monotone voice confessed to both the July 4th shooting and the murders from the previous December. But this killer wasn't content to stay in the shadows. He craved an audience. He wanted fame. On August 1st, 1969, the San Francisco Chronicle, the San Francisco Examiner, and the Vallejo Times-Herald each received a nearly identical handwritten letter. They all began with the same chilling introduction: "This is the Zodiac speaking." In these letters, filled with misspellings, the killer proved his credit for the attacks by providing details only he could have known. He claimed he was collecting his victims as slaves for the afterlife. But it was his demand that turned this regional crime spree into a national obsession. Each letter contained 1/3 of a complex 408-symbol cryptogram. The Zodiac demanded the papers publish the cipher on their front pages, threatening a kill rampage if they refused. The code, he boasted, contained his identity. The FBI's codebreakers and police cryptographers were stumped, but in a stunning turn, the code was cracked in just a few days by a Salinas high school teacher, Donald Hardin, and his wife, Betty. The world held its breath, waiting for a name. The message, however, revealed no such thing. It was a rambling, misspelled confession, filled with more taunts and a chilling glimpse into his psyche. "I like killing people because it is so much fun. It is better than killing wild game in the forest, because man is the most dangerous animal of all." The Zodiac's reign of terror was far from over. In September 1969, he attacked another young couple, Brian Hartnell and Cecilia Shepard, at Lake Berryessa. This time, the attack was pure theater. He approached them wearing a bizarre executioner-style hood and a bib decorated with his cross circle symbol. He stabbed both of them repeatedly before calmly walking to their car and drawing his symbol on the door. Cecilia Shepard died from her injuries. Miraculously, Brian Hartnell survived. Just 2 weeks later, the Zodiac struck again, this time in the heart of San Francisco, fatally shooting a cab driver named Paul Stein. He then sent a piece of Stein's blood-soaked shirt to the press as proof.
He claimed to have murdered 37 people, though only 5 deaths are officially linked to him. His letters and ciphers grew more complex. One infamous 340-character cipher sent in November 1969 remained unsolved for 51 years. When an international team of amateur sleuths finally cracked it in 2020, it offered no name, only more defiance. I hope you are having lots of fun in trying to catch me. I am not afraid of the gas chamber, because it will send me to paradise all the sooner. Over the decades, investigators have looked at over 2,500 suspects. The most famous was Arthur Lee Allen, a former schoolteacher with a disturbing past. A survivor identified him, and circumstantial evidence, like the fact he owned a Zodiac brand watch, seemed compelling. However, crucial physical evidence never materialized. His DNA and fingerprints did not match samples collected from the letters, and handwriting experts ruled him out. More recently, in 2021, an independent group of investigators called the Case Breakers pointed to a man named Gary Francis Post, an Air Force veteran who died in 2018. They claimed to have evidence connecting him through photos showing scars that matched a police sketch, and they alleged he confessed to being the Zodiac to several people. But law enforcement has never officially named Post, and many experts remain skeptical of the claims, which rely heavily on circumstantial evidence. The FBI insists the case remains open. Despite all the advances in DNA technology and genetic genealogy, no definitive match has ever been made. The Zodiac killer simply disappeared, leaving behind a legacy of fear, a series of taunting puzzles, and a question that still haunts us. Who was the man behind the hood?
Unlike the Zodiac, our next story isn't about a killer who craved the spotlight. It's about a victim who was left in complete anonymity. A case known for 65 years simply as the boy in the box. The story begins on February 25, 1957. A young man was checking his muskrat traps in a wooded, remote part of Philadelphia's Fox Chase neighborhood when he stumbled upon a large cardboard box. Inside, wrapped in a worn plaid blanket, was the naked, bruised body of a little boy, estimated to be between 4 and 6 years old. The man had set his traps illegally, and fearing he'd get in trouble with the police, he left the tragic discovery a secret. A day later, a college student driving by saw the box, and after hearing a news report about a missing child, finally called the authorities. What investigators found was a scene of both heartbreak and profound mystery. The boy was severely malnourished, his body a canvas of small scars from past and recent trauma. But there were also signs of care. He had been recently cleaned and groomed. His hair was freshly, if crudely, cut, and his knightly fingernails were trimmed. The cause of death was clear. He had been beaten to death by blunt force trauma. The investigation began with the few clues they had. The box he was found in had once held a bassinet purchased from a local J.C. Penney, but the trail went cold almost immediately. Police launched a massive publicity campaign, something unprecedented for its time. They took post-mortem photos, dressing the little boy in clothes and sitting him up in a chair to make him look more like a living child, hoping to spark a memory. They put his face on flyers and plastered them all across the country with the headline, "Heavenly Father, bless this unknown boy." His face was on the wall of every police station, his story in newspapers nationwide, yet no one, not a single parent, relative, teacher, or neighbor, ever came forward to say they knew him. It was as if he was a child from nowhere. Thousands of tips came in over the years, but they all led to dead ends. Theories swirled. One pointed to a nearby foster home, which was investigated and eventually cleared. Another incredible tip
came from a woman who claimed her abusive mother had purchased the boy, kept him in their basement, and ultimately killed him in a fit of rage before disposing of his body. But her story could not be corroborated. Decades passed. The boy was eventually buried in a potter's field, his headstone bearing a name born of tragedy, America's unknown child. For 65 years, that's where the story ended, a testament to a complete and total failure to identify a murdered child. But then came the incredible power of modern science. In 2019, investigators exhumed his body, hoping that advanced DNA analysis and the new field of genetic genealogy could finally succeed where everything else had failed. It was a painstaking process. The DNA was severely degraded after being buried for so long. But forensic geneticists worked for nearly 3 years, building a complex family tree from a distant cousin who had uploaded their DNA to a public database. Then, on December 8, 2022, the Philadelphia police made an announcement that sent shockwaves across the country. America's unknown child finally had his name back, Joseph Augustus Zarelli. He was born on January 13, 1953. Records revealed he was from a family in West Philadelphia and had living siblings, though his parents were long dead. Giving Joseph his name was a monumental victory for the generations of detectives who had refused to let his case go cold. But it wasn't the end of the mystery. The case is still an open homicide investigation. We now know who he was, but the true horror of his story remains. Who could beat a 4-year-old child to death? Who were the people who cared enough to clean and groom his body, yet so callously disposed of it? And why was he so completely abandoned, his very existence erased for over half a century? The person responsible for Joseph's death has never been found, and the true truth of his short, tragic life is a story that may never be completely told.
For our final story, we're jumping forward to the internet age, to a case that unfolded in downtown Los Angeles and went viral all because of one of the most unsettling pieces of footage you'll ever see. This is the story of Elisa Lam and her final days at the Cecil Hotel. In January 2013, Elisa Lam, a 21-year-old Canadian student from the University of British Columbia, was on a solo trip up the West Coast. An avid blogger, she was documenting her journey, an adventure she called her West Coast tour. Her journey brought her to Los Angeles, where she checked into the Cecil Hotel, a budget spot with a long and exceptionally dark history. Known to locals as Hotel Death, the Cecil has been the site of numerous suicides and murders. It also notoriously housed serial killers like Richard the Night Stalker Ramirez and Jack Unterweger during their murder sprees. Lam, who lived with bipolar disorder and depression, was in daily contact with her parents back in Canada. But on January 31st, the calls suddenly stopped. Her parents immediately reported her missing. For weeks, the LAPD found nothing. Her room was searched, but her belongings, wallet, computer, and medication were all there, with no sign of foul play. Then, on February 13, hoping for a public tip, the police released the last known sighting of her: security camera footage from inside one of the hotel's elevators. The video is silent, grainy, and deeply disturbing. For nearly 3 minutes, it shows Elisa entering the elevator and pressing a whole panel of buttons. When the doors inexplicably fail to close, her behavior becomes increasingly strange. She peeks out into the hallway, looking quickly both ways, as if she's scared of being seen, or perhaps playing a game of hide and seek. She darts back into the elevator, pressing herself into the corner as if hiding from someone. Then she steps out again,
and begins making strange, disjointed hand gestures, her fingers splayed as she moves her hands, almost as if she's talking to someone just out of frame. After a few more moments of this bizarre behavior, she wanders off to the left, and the elevator doors finally, eerily close on their own. She was never seen alive again. The video exploded online. Millions of people became amateur detectives, dissecting every single frame. Theories ran wild. Some believed her frantic gestures and hiding were clear signs of a severe psychotic episode, a terrifying break from reality. Others, pointing to the hotel's grim history, suggested a paranormal encounter. Many were convinced she was hiding from a real person, a pursuer who was just outside the camera's view. Meanwhile, back at the Cecil Hotel, a disturbing problem was emerging. Guests began complaining about low water pressure. Then came complaints that the tap water was discolored and tasted off. On the morning of February 19th, a maintenance worker went to the roof to check the hotel's large water cisterns. He climbed a ladder to the top of the 4 1,000-gallon tanks, opened the heavy lid, and made a horrifying discovery. The naked body of Elisa Lam was floating face up inside. The discovery only deepened the mystery. How did she even get up there? The main door to the roof was locked and alarmed, intended to keep guests out. While fire escapes could provide access, she would then have to climb a 10-foot ladder to the top of the water tank, somehow lift the heavy, difficult-to-move lid, and get inside, all by herself. The LA County Coroner's Office officially ruled her death an accidental drowning, with her bipolar disorder listed as a significant factor. The report noted that toxicology tests showed she was taking some, but not all, of her prescribed medication, suggesting she may have been undertreated, which could have triggered a manic or psychotic episode. The official theory is that in a state of delusion, she sought refuge on the roof, climbed into the tank to hide, and tragically drowned, unable to get out or replace the heavy lid from within. But for many, that explanation just doesn't add up. It doesn't fully account for her bizarre behavior in the elevator or the seemingly impossible logistics of getting into that tank alone. The case was officially closed, but the questions won't go away. Was it a tragic accident? A young woman's downward spiral into the depths of mental illness? Or was there someone else in that hallway with her, a presence unseen by the camera, but terrifyingly real to Elisa? The eerie footage of Elisa Lam's final moments ensures her death remains one of America's most haunting, unsolved horror stories.